everyone. Welcome to the Gender and Friendship podcast. My name is Katie,
And I'm Michaela.
and today we'll be talking about gender and friendship networks and how connection shapes our mental health. So, kind of just starting out, Michaela, what do we feel like our listeners should know just to start out?
Well, Katie, did you know that adolescents in dense peer networks are significantly less likely to engage in self injurious behaviors compared to those in isolated clusters?
Wow, that is so powerful. I think that we hope that this episode will share with our listeners that they can connect with people in a lot of different ways and that can safeguard them against mental health. Michaela and I, we conducted a survey that showed that most respondents have about 3 to 5 close friends, and then women lead more towards about 6 to 9 friends. With with men, it was more, it was less than that compared to women. And it was so powerful just to kind of see the differences between gender on how we operate within our social networks and what impact our gender can have on those friendships.
Yeah, so we've divided the research from our survey and from the study we've done on our own into 2 different episodes. And for this episode, we'd like to focus on how connection shapes mental health.
Mm-hmm. And so, firstly, we found that with structured peer activities and inclusive social clusters in schools and communities, that this can foster any protection against self-injury. And this was super powerful for me to find. It was also interesting to notice that women have a different way of creating these friendships through tend and befriend coping strategies that helps reduce loneliness, specifically for women.
Yeah, it was interesting as we read peer reviewed articles and then we did, the survey. It was cool to see how girls' relationships differed from boys' relationships. Another study that we looked into showed that boys show higher rates of shyness and withdrawal and dependency, limiting friendship formation. That being said, um, boys and girls, while girls are really good at tending and befriending, um, boys are really good at spending time together and doing activities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's pros and cons to each strength of
Yeah.
relationship qualities.
Michaela, why do you feel that this would be important for listeners to know that girls and boys operate differently when it comes to creating friendships?
Yeah, so in our survey, we asked 15 questions. The questions were: what is your age range? What qualities or experiences make a friendship feel meaningful to you? How often do you experience feelings of loneliness? How many people would you consider close friends? What is one thing you wish you could change in your friendships? How often do you communicate or spend time with your close friends in person or online? What do you think contributes most to feelings connected or disconnected in friendships? How much do social expectations or stereotypes about gender influence how people express emotions in friendships? Have you ever chosen not to share emotions or experience with friends because of their gender? How comfortable are you discussing personal or hard topics with your other gender friends? What is your gender identity? How comfortable are you discussing personal or hard topics with your same gender friends? How would you describe the level of emotional connection in your friendships? And if yes, what usually stops you from opening up? And are you currently a student? From our survey, as we were talking about like loneliness, and when we asked about loneliness and stuff, uh, we we tried to kind of get a grasp for maybe how if people were feeling lonely or how lonely they were feeling, and I I guess by gender, females said that about so while 11 females responded that they sometimes feel lonely, 8 responded that they rarely feel lonely, and 3 responded that they often feel lonely. For males, 8 responded that they sometimes feel lonely, 4 responded that they rarely feel lonely, 4 often or 4 said they often feel lonely, and then 2 said that they always feel lonely.
Yeah.
So
That's really interesting. It seems like the males, they tended more towards the extremes of loneliness. They either always felt or never felt
yeah,
loneliness.
yeah, and
That's
so
interesting.
maybe that could go back to depending on what activities, I guess these males tend to do in their friendships, or I know we'll probably talk about this in a sec, but emotional vulnerability, like how if they have more relationships either with males or females and they're emotionally vulnerable, that might determine where they fall on the spectrum. And maybe girls, because they tend to have those tend and befriend relationships that create space for emotional vulnerability, that maybe that's why they fall more into the middle of the spectrum and less onto the ends.
Yeah. Another interesting finding, I think that your thought relates perfectly to this, is that friendship quality matters more than quantity. And so with the men, it's showing that the main issue isn't the quantity of their friends. That thankfully is not the issue, but the depth rather than the quantity. And so from our research, it shows that positive friendship experiences strongly correlated to reduce loneliness and depressive symptoms, specifically in youth. And that's really interesting to find, especially with the statistics from the survey, showing that men kind of reside in those extremes for loneliness.
I love the idea that high quality relationships contribute to, or I guess can offset loneliness, right? Because that's already an action item we can take and work with, which kind of maybe can lead into the recommendations or solutions portion of this episode.
What do you feel like are the ways to create those quality friendships from what you've noticed?
Man, I think that's a really good question. Honestly, I think it differs for every person. I love the idea of a love map. I know growing up, I've heard a lot about love languages. And in one of my family studies classes, we talked about love maps, which is kind of more of an intricate idea of rather than knowing, oh, you're good at receiving gifts, that's what makes you feel loved, or I'm good at giving words of affirmation, and that's how I show love, right? Yeah. A love map is knowing things about people in different circumstances. If you were to kind of map out someone's life, right? Like if I were to map out your life, Katie, in this visual map, I'd picture, maybe a treat island, right? Or like a hobbies island, or what does Katie like to do together when we hang out island. I think things like that, paying attention to details of really what makes people feel seen and heard, are great ways to, it's a great start to developing a high quality relationship. In one of the readings for that same class, actually yesterday, the reading talked about how we can't be afraid to tell people what we want and need. And it doesn't have to be demanding or petty or irritating, but just like, hey, I really appreciate it when I can make eye contact with you while we're talking. I feel heard when we do that. Or I really enjoyed taking a walk together because it showed me that you were willing to spend time with me.
I love the focus on realizing how people receive and give friendship. And I think that applies to everyone, regardless of your gender identity or the stereotypes that people may experience when it comes to creating friendships. I have thought a lot about being personally mindful of, like you said, how you receive love and care, and being expressive about what we need, but also being present with those around us. And that can look like different things for each person, being in a room with them or being there when things get hard or easy. Being available is a huge part of that connection. And so this can look like being able to call someone when they need someone to talk to, or asking how your day is going. It can be just through a simple message, but that being present looks different for each person. And that quality can be created regardless of if you're male, female, and any gender identity. I think that being present and, like you were saying, acknowledging the ways that we feel loved can make a great difference in the friendships that we experience.
Yeah, I think this is a great lead into our takeaways section. What are some good takeaways from this episode for listeners?
So kind of what we started with, which was our statistic on isolation and how those that are adolescents specifically that are isolated are more likely to engage in injurious behaviors and may experience decreased mental health. The opposite of that would be to connect and to build those social networks. So one of the first action points would be to reduce that isolation through openness and intentional time with those around us and improve our general mental health.
I love that. I think there's a lot to be said for working to develop a positive relationship with those around us and also working to develop a positive relationship with ourselves. And I think that as we work on both of those things, it can help the other aspect of that grow.
Yeah, so kind of moving forward, we recommend to our listeners to, if you would like to learn more about the ways that gender can stereotype the ways that we create friendships and maintain friendships throughout our life, the class at BYU is so helpful to know a little bit more about that. A couple other things that they can turn to are listening to this podcast, going to, there is a book titled How to Win Friends and Influence People that has been helpful for me regardless of where I'm at, and I know it can help the general student population if they are experiencing loneliness and wanting to create those friendships.
Yeah, and I might add, the class that I was referring to was titled Intro to Family Processes. Mm-hmm. It's taught by Brian Willoughby. So yeah, yes. And then the class that we're doing this podcast for, it's called Gender Development in Families, taught by Adam Rogers.
So highly recommend both those courses, and we hope that this podcast has been helpful in your own friendships and those around you. And we know that as we move forward with understanding how to combat isolation and to have an awareness of someone's love map, like Michaela was saying, and to be present in those friendships, that we can safeguard against any mental health behavior, negative mental health behaviors, and create a more connected friendship network.
Yeah, thank you for listening, and we hope that this has been helpful in some way. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.